Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you're a sales professional, not in sales, but interested in helping people solve problems, or you're a founder, CEO who's looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. This is Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. I'm excited to have Jeff Davis on the podcast this week. Jeff is the author of the new book, Create Togetherness, international keynote speaker and business consultant. Jeff, it is awesome to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Mike, I am super excited to be on the podcast. So thank you for the invite.
I know we've had a number of conversations that have been off microphone or not been recorded. And the compelling event that's happened to bring us together here is you have just launched a book.
Yes.
You share just kind of some high level points on why now for the book and why folks would want to read it.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, the title of the book is Create Togetherness. The landing page for the book is createtogethernessbook.com. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. And I was really motivated to write the book, I should say, because I was frustrated. I am a career salesperson that transitioned into marketing for quite some time and always saw that sales and marketing did not appreciate the value that they brought each other. And a lot of that, stems from the fact that we just don't fundamentally understand what the other brings to the table. And so in the book, I really address many topics, but the key ones that I think that B2B revenue leaders will want to pick it up and try to implement into their businesses. At the end of the day, it's a strategic roadmap really for helping these teams strategically align sales and marketing to accelerate revenue. I go through the history of why sales and marketing has this dysfunctional relationship that we experience today. We talk about the cost of misalignment to the organization and really the cost of not doing anything. I think a lot of people are compelled to continue status quo, which is just not an option anymore. I also go into the benefits of sales and marketing alignment and how it's become a strategic differentiator and really should be looked at in that way. And then also go into my strategic framework for achieving sales and marketing alignment transformation. And we'll probably do a little bit deeper dive in that later in the conversation, but that is kind of the high level of the book. So at the end of the day, it is a combination of helping people think strategically, but also giving them the tools and the resources they need to make things happen. I try to make it as applicable as possible and also a relatively short read because I'm thinking about executives that might be, flying to a meeting or flying to a client and they can actually pick it up on their way to the airport and hopefully read majority of it on the plane and the flight.
So one of the things I struggle with, and it shocks me to continue to struggle with this, but I still do. I don't understand how, if we're all operating within the same operating environment, meaning we have the same domain at the end of our email address, we have the same signature on the paychecks that we receive, we have the same logo on our business card or the t-shirt that we wear. Why is there this disconnect why has there historically been this disconnect between sales and marketing? Why do they mix like oil and water in many cases?
Yeah, to oversimplify it, misaligned incentives. That's really what it comes down to. We created silos between sales and marketing, and it may sound contrary to what people believe. I don't believe that silos necessarily a bad thing. I think what silos allow us to do, sales and marketers, is to really hone in and really become experts at their craft. If you look at the subtitle of the book, I should say, I was very thoughtful about how I said it, and it was transform sales and marketing, because what I realized is there are a couple different things happening at the same time. Not only do we have to transform the relationship between sales and marketing, become more aligned, but we also have to transform the way sales and marketing go after the modern buyer. Like we can't sell the way we did 3 to 5 years ago. And the marketing tactics that we use, 3 or 5, 10 years ago don't work anymore, right? And so you have two things happening at the same time. And it's not just about improving the sales marketing relationship, but it's also making sure that we are stepping our game up in our individual silos in order to make sure that we are doing and contributing our part. And to your point about, us operating under one kind of domain, I totally agree with you. However, when your incentives are misaligned with the key person you're supposed to be working with, people are always going to default what they're incentivized to do. People get upset, especially salespeople, get upset with marketers, like, oh, their leads are poor, like terrible. And then these leads convert. And I said, well, here's the thing. They're being incentivized on volume, not quality.
Right.
If you incentivize them on volume, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure I hit that, regardless of how good the leads are. And so we have to really step back for 2 seconds and empathize with people because they're operating under what they're incentivized to do.
It's amazing when you think about it in those simple terms of just follow the money.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because when you say it like that, salespeople are like, yeah, follow the money. I go, what do you think marketers are doing? It's the same thing. They're
Right.
following the money.
Yep.
I get my bonus when I get you 10,000 leads. So
That's
I'm
right.
gonna get you 10,000 leads.
That's exactly right. And so then you get into, and we're going to bounce around through the book as we work through the conversation, but we get into this whole piece of data. How can we look at data differently as an organization to help make sure to help drive or help reinforce some of that alignment that you're talking about?
Well, first of all, we have to realize that in B2B, data literally has become more valuable than oil. Our B2C counterparts have known this forever. We are just getting to the point where we understand that when we truly have a hold on our data and actually can convert it into insights, it allows us to make smarter, better business decisions faster. I think beyond that, what we have to realize is that we have to start, first of all, looking at the same data. When you have these silos, unfortunately, what we've done historically is that sales has their data, marketing has their data. A lot of times they're operating with completely different data sets. And so there is no way to really know what is happening in reality because our views of reality are different. I was talking to one CEO actually on my podcast, and one of the reasons that he started his company, which I've heard time and time again, he's got frustrated because sales would come in the room and say, the quarter's down, we just can't get in front of people. It's really, really challenging, et cetera, et cetera. And then marketing would come right back afterwards and say, oh, we got the most leads we've ever had. We did it. He's like, how is this happening? These are two fundamentally different outcomes. What is going on? And it's because their view of the world was different. And a lot of that comes down to the data they're using. It's different data. So we have to, first of all, recognize how important investing in good data is. And then secondly, making sure that we are aligning those two data sets so that we can see the same version of reality.
Where does common vocabulary come into play when talking about that data?
Yeah, as you start to move into more cross-functional interactions, it's really, really important to be clear about the way in which you speak. I always say words matter. And I don't disparage against sales speak and marketing speak. And there just is, right? There's a way salespeople talk to salespeople and the way that marketing people talk to marketing people. And I'm not saying we have to throw those away tomorrow, but anytime we're having a revenue focused conversation, whether that be a cross-functional meeting, whether it be an all hands meeting, whatever that looks like, we need to agree on terminology, and not only the terminology, but the definition of those terms. So what is an MQL? What is an SQL? What defines a good lead? We have to really be clear because you can get into a situation where you think that you're on the same page and then you go back to your respective silos or whatever you want to call it, and your approach is completely different. So, we need to start talking in the terms of revenue, customer interactions, buyer journey, whatever that is, primary. And then secondary, we can talk about our functional vocabulary and go into sales speakers, marketing people when we're amongst our tribe.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how we talk about culture inside organization. And, one of the drivers of the culture is how we communicate. And I know that's part of your framework. How does vocabulary play a role in communication, and what can we do differently? As I mix two questions together, what can we do differently when it comes to that communication?
Yeah, no, I totally understand your question. So, what I push for in the book, and I talk about it, is at the end of the day, the buyer is in the driver's seats, right? Digital disruption has completely changed the buyer-seller relationship and it has changed the dynamics between buyer and seller. And while I think a good number of companies are starting to recognize that, we as an industry have not fully embraced the fact that the dynamics have just changed. Buyers are coming to the table more informed. And when we start talking about features and benefits, they really don't care because they found all of that on the internet. So everything should be focused and served up in terms of the buyer, the customer. And that will help alleviate a lot of the, is this yours? Is this mine? This is my territory. This is that, that turf war that happens. Because at the end of the day, the buyer doesn't care if it comes from sales, marketing, customer success. They don't care. They just want the information and they want to get what they need in order to make an informed decision about their business. So your job as a revenue leader, whether it be sales or marketing, is to really find a way to partner with your colleagues and orchestrate a optimal interaction so that the buyer is getting what they need.
Yeah, they're not really looking to do business with you. They're looking to solve a problem.
You got it. And so if we talk and create language that's customer focused, like, your mantra can always be what's best for the customer. Oh, should, this white paper go here and then what's best for the customer? And sometimes that may fall out of the standard process, and you have to be flexible enough to recognize that and say, hey, this is not what they're asking for. They want this, so let's give it to them.
I think what's awesome about that question, what's best for the customer, is it takes the ownership or the onus, if that's even the right word, off of us as sales leaders or marketing leaders or revenue operations leaders or revenue leaders inside the organization. And it puts things back on the customer. And it's not about the bias that we have based on how we're measured inside an organization or driven by our own agenda. It's very customer focused, very buyer centric. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, you got it. And while it is challenging to orchestrate that internally, and I totally recognize that, it makes it much easier because we start to think of what the buyer is going through and what they need to achieve versus guessing. And many times we create these elaborate buyer's journeys and they should do this and we want them to do this and then they'll do this. And what I challenge, my clients, or even when, I'm working with leaders in an executive workshop, I said, I keep hearing the word, what we want them to do and what we want them to do next. It's not about we, it's about what does the buyer need? What are they trying to accomplish? And so even as I go through the buying cycle, modern buying cycle, as I talk about it in the book, it's always framed up in the way that during this phase, what is the buyer trying to accomplish and how do we give them what they need in order to feel confident that they want to go to the next phase with us?
And but you think you mentioned it earlier in the conversation, but now what you're starting to talk about is this, and it seems like it's becoming an overused term, but empathy. How do we become more empathetic, or how can we be more empathetic to the needs of our customer base?
Well, I think there's two actually, and I agree with you. Empathy is kind of thrown around a lot, and I put it in the book, but I think there's two ways to look at that. I think first of all, and you didn't necessarily ask this, but I'm going to add it to the conversation.
Perfect.
There's internal empathy that we need to get better at doing. One of the reasons that sales and marketing continues to have a dysfunctional relationship, as many know, did not start yesterday or last week. This has been going on for decades. And a lot of that is that we just don't know each other. And so when you're able to show a salesperson what a marketer does and how it contributes to their work and vice versa, it is much easier to get them to align and to think, how does what I'm doing impact my colleague? How is what I'm doing helping contribute to what we as a revenue engine are trying to accomplish? And so there's that form of empathy. And that's not just about getting along and having more meetings and doing outings. Those are great and important, but it's about helping the individuals within the sales and marketing team understand their business relationship with their colleagues. So that's the first type of empathy, internal empathy. When we talk about the empathy that you were really referring to initially, is the buyer empathy, right? We historically have been trained to push people through a sales process. And that is no longer an option because they can easily opt out of it because we no longer have control of the flow of information. So that is now forcing us to have to really think and be very thoughtful about what they need, which I would argue we probably should have been doing anyway, but we're being forced to do it now. And buyers can sense that. It's not about you, it's about them. And when they have an interaction with you that starts to feel about you just getting what you need, they will immediately disconnect and go to somebody else.
And it's amazing how quick that shift can happen. As soon as you start making it about you and not about the person on the other end, the whole dynamic changes. You're no longer there. Yeah, you're no longer there helping people solve problems. You're there trying to solve your problem, which happens to be a revenue problem. And
exactly.
That's not a good place to be.
One great example I had, I was talking to a client and they were like, yeah, we're customer focused and, it's all about the customer and blah, 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 blah. And, one litmus test that I use is I always go to the company's website. And, obviously it's an indicator of what is happening internally. And stereotypically, I find that there's a strong correlation. And the website was all about, we're the biggest company since 19, and we're the number one in the industry. And I said, at no point on this website have you talked about your customer. How can you be focused?
Yeah. Wow.
And people, and I always kind of get that response is that you don't think about it because, historically, it's a shift in the way that we look at how we communicate. Historically, that is what we did. We're the number one in the industry. You want to work with us because we have all these awards and those things are nice. But when they are the lion's share of how you communicate, with your potential buyer, it's just like, okay, great. That's awesome about you. But how are you helping me achieve my goals?
Right. Yeah. How many people, whether you're a founder or CEO out there, or you're operating your own business, or you're even just operating your own territory, how many of you out there are really going to be successful or meet your number buying from yourselves? You're not. It just doesn't, it doesn't happen. You've got to think about, you have a customer on the other end who's making a decision. And as Jeff has mentioned a couple of times as we've gone through this conversation, there's so much more information that's out there. There's what your customers are looking for, someone to help guide them, help them navigate this decision-making process, get the information, reduce friction, make it easy for them to go through this process. And if you're just talking about yourself, it becomes very apparent that you're more focused on you than you are on your customers.
And there's another phenomenon that's happening too that I call it I didn't coin the term, but I should say I refer to it as the consumerization of B2B. And so some people have said that B2B is becoming more like B2C, which I do agree. We're always about probably 5 to 10 years behind the B2C folks. But we forget as B2B practitioners, whether you be an early stage founder or you be somebody in a more established company, that the person on the other side of the email, the phone, is also a person. And they are a buyer just like you when you buy things. And so I've worked with people and I've reversed the thing that they're doing on them. And I asked them after each touch point, how did that feel to you? Oh, that was kind of weird. I was actually expecting this and I wish I would have gotten this. I go, if you're feeling that way, your target buyer's feeling that way. Right. So sometimes we just have to stop for 2 seconds and not be so, this is the process, but always evaluating, is that process the right one? And does it flow and make you feel like you're achieving what you're trying to achieve? But I find this very weird phenomenon that happens in B2B, that somehow we feel that once we come into the office, we no longer are humans and that we make decisions purely on the data that you're sharing with us in an email and bullet points. I'm like, that's not how you bought your, whatever it is over the weekend with your wife and kids. You bring you with you to work.
Yeah, and this brings up one of the other points that as you were describing, you're talking about the structure of the book. One of the other areas you get into is this cost of misalignment. Can you speak to the cost of misalignment here?
Yeah, for sure. And so there's a couple different ways that you can look at it. I love the CSO Insights data where they talk about the fact that, B2B sales reps have not been hitting quota for many, many years. So when they started tracking the data in 2014, we were about 63% of sales reps in the B2B space that were achieving quota. Now we're down, as of 2018, down to 54.3, which, year over year, we continue to miss quota. In addition to that, we also look, InsideSales.com has some really compelling data that 36.6% of a salesperson's time is actually focused on revenue generating activities. So these two things to me tell us that, we're doing more, we have better technology, we're hiring more reps, we're doing all this stuff more, but it's not leading to us getting better at selling and getting more efficient and more effective. And so I argue that we have to start really being mindful and thoughtful of not just doing more and focus on the volume of activity, but making sure that we understand the way that we need to be really connecting with the modern buyer and changing and focusing on quality and focusing on making sellers more effective, not just adding more salespeople, because what we're effectively doing is we're wasting a ton of money. We're just wasting money. And so when you look at it in that way, that loss of productivity, there actually is a Marketo study that actually equated the loss of sales productivity and wasted marketing spend up to $1 trillion for a business.
So what are some questions that we should be asking ourselves inside our business when it comes to addressing this question, or at least starting to shine a light on a challenge that might exist related to this? What are the questions we should be asking?
Yeah. So first of all, when you look at it from the sales and marketing context, all roads lead to revenue. Mm-hmm. Are we able to achieve the revenue growth goals that we want to achieve year over year? And if the answer to that is no, then we need to do a deeper dive into seeing what's going on. Some of the indicators that I talk about in the book or symptoms of misalignment are, poor quality leads coming from marketing. It's not necessarily, again, as we talk about, it's not necessarily that your marketing team is bad, but have we identified who we need to get in front of, what kind of conversations we need, and or they incentivized to get those leads? So one of the things I talk about as well in the book is one of the reasons sales leaders should be compelled to talk to marketing and have a better relationship with them is that at the end of the day, your job is to enable your people, your sales reps, to get into conversations with the right people. And if marketing, for whatever reason, is out in the market, either targeting the wrong people or saying the wrong things to get them into conversations, like you need to have a say in that message and make sure that they're painting the right picture so that your sales folks can come in and make that one-on-one connection and convert to business. So really, really important. Also, to just really asking people, how they spend their time. Obviously prospecting and sort of thing is important to a sales rep's day. But if they're doing a ton of research and, beyond what's normal and trying to find, these articles and that sort of thing, and it's something that marketing can do and it's in their wheelhouse, why not? One perfect example of that is social selling, right? LinkedIn is an amazing opportunity to get information about and engage with prospects. As a sales leader, do I want my sales reps spending half of their day looking for articles and trying to find journals that are going to get them in front of their customers and potentially give them a post? Probably not. But I know what marketing does very well. They understand our customer and they understand what resources they use for research and who they trust. Why not have them do that and really direct my sales reps into, here are the articles that, our target buyers finds, articles or magazines or whatever resources they find credible, and this is where they find research. Here are some of the compelling things that are going in the market, and help them position themselves as a, informed seller within that industry. It's a much better use of their time. I want my people on the phone.
It's really amazing what happens when you bring a team together and have the team leverage the capabilities and strengths of their specific area. I mean, I think the key thing that I took away from what you just shared there, Jeff, is know that marketing does some things really, really well, and identify ways where, as a member of the sales organization, you can leverage that expertise, bring that expertise together, and take advantage of that expertise. And it's not to drive home my own personal agenda, but it's more of saying, hey, this is an area where I might have blind spots. Somebody else can do it a bit better. And maybe it's better to get the marketing person in front of the customer to ask some of these questions, or even just ask the marketing team for some insight about what they're seeing in the market and how things are shifting. I don't believe that anybody goes into work each day and says, I want to see how bad I can screw this up.
No, and you're 100% correct. As a revenue leader, I would want to figure out, how do I make each one of my headcount more efficient and more effective, rather than just hiring for volume in order to be able to cover pipeline, right? Yeah. And we also have to have the conversation about, I need my marketing folks to also be focused on contributing pipeline, because that they are able to do that. And so when we really sit down at the table and say, how do we best leverage ourselves? One of the things that you made me think of, case in point, I've seen, depending on the industry, field marketing events be really effective. There is a difference when you invite somebody to a marketing event that is educational, that may, have a mix of current clients and prospects for them to, learn something that's related to your product, but also network and have conversations and make connections with folks that are already enjoying your product and get their perspective. People will go to that. They get to learn, they get to, network and that sort of thing. But it's very different when it's put on by sales, because you feel like you're going to get sold, and people are like, right. I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah. So that is an opportunity for the marketing team to say, hey, we realize you're struggling in this geography or whatever it is. We're going to throw this event. We're going to have you join us so that you can just naturally blend in, have some conversation, and it doesn't come off so salesy. You know what I mean? It's opportunities like that where you can work together, all focused obviously on, target buyers, but it's the way you serve it up to the market that makes it a more efficient and more effective. Yeah.
And it brings back to that, question that you had asked before, and I'm going to butcher it, but it was, how does this impact the customer? What's the impact on the customer? What does the customer need as you're going through and saying that through that evaluation process of, is this the best way to communicate? So yes, from a sales perspective, I want this collateral because I want to deliver a great brochure about something. Well, how does that actually impact the customer? Are we aligned there?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other nuance that I would add to that is, how is it contributing value to the customer getting closer to making a decision? Because I always push people for is, this is a stereotypical example, right? Somebody sends you an email and they say, just checking in, or wanted to put this at the top of your inbox, or I'm not sure if you got this. What do we always inevitably do when you get those? And we've all gotten them, right? You're like, yeah, this is really annoying. You either delete it or you say like, look, I'm just not interested. Yep. I actually was speaking at Northwestern University's business school, the Kellogg School of Business, I think last week. The professor there, Craig Wortman, who actually also wrote the foreword to my book, he has an entrepreneurial selling class there. He invited me to come in, and one of the students asked a really, really, I thought, really great question. And these are, the students that are looking to potentially, transition into a sales career post MBA. And she said, what is the difference between being persistent and being, I think she said, annoying? She might have used another word. And I thought about it for a second. And I said, it's a fine line. But I said, when you lead with adding value with every interaction that you have with the potential, target buyer, customer, et cetera, that is persistent because you're always adding something to the conversation. When you become annoying is that when you keep poking me and you're adding no value to the conversation, or you're not giving me any new insights. I said, from my perspective, that's the difference.
It gets back to that piece that you were talking about before. If it's about you, if it's about you as the seller or me as the seller, and about a personal agenda, yes, it's going to be annoying and it's going to come off the wrong way. If it's about adding value, another one of those overused terms in there, but if it's about making an impact, it's about helping them do something that they're trying to do, helping them overcome challenge. If it's about them, then that is received much better.
For sure.
Yep. So I've got, we've talked about a number of different things, as we've kind of worked through this arc of the book. One of the pieces that we've not hit on, unless I've missed it as we've been discussing through, but we've hit on the framework from a data perspective. We've also talked a bit about communication. What should we be thinking about from a process perspective?
Yeah, process is really, really important because by virtue that we've operated in silos for so long, most sales leaders and most marketing leaders are really operating with one hand over one eye. They only get to see one sliver of the entire revenue generating process, and they are developing, strategies and tactics based on that. So what I argue is that really we need to see a full revenue funnel to understand where the opportunities exist in order to optimize the experience for the target buyer, target customer, et cetera. And so really from a process standpoint, which is directly related to data, is that I want to have my sales and marketing leader be able to sit down and have a revenue funnel discussion and look at everything from first touch point of a marketing piece of collateral, whatever that may be, all the way to close and becoming a customer, so that we can figure out what's working, what's not working. Is it the handoff between sales and marketing? Is there a particular marketing interaction that really accelerates people to purchase? Let's invest more in that. What does that look like? And as a sales leader, if I don't have the ability to see all those things, I don't really know where to push back or to ramp up or whatnot, because I just know that I'm getting leads from some source out in the universe, right? And one of the questions that a lot of times I ask when I'm working with a team, I'll ask the sales leader, do you know what is the what marketing is doing that leads to the highest ROI? Because the reason that question is so important is that when we start talking about trade-offs, and that's reality of things, we have to invest in some things and pull back on other things. But if we don't know what is leading to the highest conversion rates across the entire funnel, we don't know where to invest our resources and what to turn on, what to turn off. And so, that is really where we've got to get to, is we have a full view of the entire revenue funnel. And then obviously a subset of that is, employing more account-based marketing or account-based selling, however you want to refer to it, in order to really, really get those high potential target customers and get really engaged and personal and that sort of thing.
Please follow Jeff on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram, and check out his book, Create Togetherness. I'll include links in the show notes. If you know of someone who would benefit from hearing this discussion, please share it with them and let us know via Twitter or LinkedIn. I'd like to hear how you're applying the lessons learned and concepts discussed in your role today. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?